How did he attract this movie star woman? Well, let's call out the elephant in the room first. So Dax Shepard is taller than her. He's in movies. She's more successful than he is, though. She's a bigger movie star. And really, this is not our call today is not about how did one movie star get together with another movie star, but how does he keep her attracted? How is their marriage grown stronger over time? And because they're both in the spotlight, because they're both public figures, we've got some really cool behind the scenes interviews with both of them. Really, this is about how does he keep her attracted? How do we keep a woman attracted? How do we re-attract a woman in long-term monogamous relationship? That's what our call today is about. That's what our calls are always about with Cynthia and myself here on the C Note Show. We teach men how to love and lead, how to help her feel the power of your conscious presence of God, so to speak, or the universe flowing through you. And that's a more esoteric way to say that she wants to feel the chemistry between the two of you. She wants to feel like there's a charge. She wants to feel the adventure, just being with you in relationship as a man. And you also want to know, what is she responsible for? Is this all my responsibility? Our previous call last week, or if you're watching this on YouTube, go to our previous video. Last week, our title was She Feels Used When You Aren't Fully Embodied. And of course, us good men don't want her to feel used, of course, but we've accidentally done that in lots of ways. And we spoke about that last week, last call. So go back and watch that. And today's about how Dax Shepard has attracted Kristen Bell and how he's kept her attracted, not by just happy wife, happy life, not by just pleasing her all the time, not by walking on eggshells. In fact, quite the opposite. And we're going to get into that here today in just a moment. I'll be asking Cynthia about this as we go along as well. Oh, yeah. If you want to check out our stuff, go to our website, greatmenmovemountains.com. If you want to be on our book wait list, get notifications of our teaching videos or invites to calls like this, sign up for our newsletter. So greatmenmovemountains.com/new subscriber. All right. So some from People Magazine, when she first met Dax, it's a bit of him flirting with her, and we'll get into that. But I want to start today off with a behind the scenes video. How does he see Kristen Bell? Does he kiss her ass? Does he supplicate himself? Well, no. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. And then we'll talk with Cynthia about this here today through the points that we go through. All right, let's watch this video. Here we go.
As an ex-addict dirtbag who met this woman who's basically, Disney deemed her a princess.
Right.
She is the embodiment of all that is good and wonderful about women.
Yes.
And I wonder, how it worked that you put those two lives together.
Well, this answer is going to surprise you, and it's going to be off-putting, but I'm going to tell you the real answer.
Okay.
Which is, I have this very weird mix of not thinking I'm good looking, general low self-esteem, chip on my shoulder that I'm dumb because I was dyslexic, all these things. Yet, unbridled arrogance in relationships. I've always been that way.
Really?
I don't know how to explain it. I've always felt very confident in relationships. So I never, ever was like, oh, I hope I can keep Kristen. I was going, do I want to be with a Christian who has 8 people living in her house for free, who has to get out of a car when there's a dog that doesn't have a leash and ruin her whole day to rescue this dog? Do I want to be? That's great, she's good, but that's not what I want to do. I'm not that good. I don't want to spend my day finding the owner of a dog. So I wasn't fearful I would lose her. I wasn't certain I wanted to be with someone like that.
So let's go ahead and pause there. There's some more that we'll get into as well. But Cynthia, right off the bat, what are you seeing with how Dax is approaching his now wife, Kristen? How is he thinking about himself? How is he thinking about the relationship? What's the vibe that you're getting from him in this first minute and a half of the video?
Yeah, I feel like I get to feel almost his ground zero. There's a lot of groundedness there. I feel like I can feel into who he is as a man and what he values, and also his kingly eye. Like, he's not trying to jump through hoops to please anyone else or please a woman. He's very much on his 2 feet and scanning the horizon, making assertions and basically, sizing up a situation to see if it works for him. it works for the tree of who he is? Does he want her particular way her leaves move to be around the trunk of who he is?
And it seems as though he's very bought into who he is. What does that vibe feel like to a woman when she first meets him, or 10 years or 20 years down the road, that he owns his shit? They opened it with, he's an ex-addict dirt bag who married a Disney princess. And, you know, they say that with a chuckle. What does that feel like to a woman when he owns himself?
Yeah, at first blush, when a woman feels that kind of energy, it feels solid. So immediately in her own body, she feels more grounded to the earth because there's something in him she can lean her hands up against and feel. There isn't this constantly moving part of him that's trying to hide or tuck away parts of himself that make her spidey senses kind of go into overdrive, and her ways of coping, blocking herself, trying to push someone over, come alive.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's awesome. So when they first met, according to this interview in People magazine, she noticed how chatty he was. She said, "This guy can talk." Meanwhile, he was suspicious of what he termed the unbridled happiness exhibited by her and her friends. He said, "I thought something stinks here. They're in a cult," he said. Right. And I fucking love this picture. This has got to be a troll, right? This picture. They had to, like, this is for a sitcom or something. They got canceled. I don't know. This picture. I just had to show this. They said 2 weeks later, after their initial encounter, each of them, both Michigan natives, met again at a Detroit Red Wings hockey game and bonded over their shared home state. Okay, so they have shared interest. The next day, he got her number from a friend so he could contact her. And I thought this was really ballsy. According to her, his opening text was bold. "I violated your privacy and got your number from a friend. How do you feel about that?" She said, I was like, okay, starting off with a really good joke that made me feel like butterflies. I fell in love with him way before he fell in love with me. Now, if she wasn't into him violating her privacy and texting her would be creepy and unwanted. But it seemed as though they had already bonded. He was already a humorous guy. He already didn't know that he liked her. This whole, like, he was suspicious of her. He wasn't initially bought into her. And then she thought that his text here was funny. I was like, okay, starting off with a good joke gives me butterflies. What are you seeing in between the lines here? And then we'll jump back to the video to get more of his point of view. What are you seeing with the way he's being with her in this opening exchange?
He goes for the truth. What it feels like to me is he's also willing to unabashedly and without self-shame or shaming of the other call out the elephant in the room. I can't remember exactly what he said. Crossed, like, I violated your privacy. I mean, sure, that's a funny thing to say, but he's also calling out the elephant in the room instead of hiding or as if it was something he did wrong or he was like tiptoeing around the situation.
Yeah, in the chat, he still looks at his own values and is not controlling of hers. Goes for the truth. Yeah, good stuff. Mystery. Yeah, and it's okay if you don't know who these people are. All right, that's okay. Totally okay. All right, let's jump back to the video here.
And then what happened, which could have only happened the way it did, is that she never ever said to me, you know, you could be a little better of a person. She never ever suggested that I should do that. Instead, I just slowly through time watched what fruit she bore out of the way she moved through life. I looked at the results of how she lived, and they're pretty undeniable. So here's me who's like thinks she lets people take advantage of her and live for free off of her, and maybe she pays this manager too much, or whatever the thing the cynical protective part of my brain was saying. I could also acknowledge she's bringing in a lot more money than you. She's getting ahead. Like, well, for all these people that are making a fool of her, she's doing a lot better than you are. I just couldn't deny the reality of how her life unfolds. There's something charmed about it. And I think it's charmed because it starts with her being just endlessly generous and loving and giving people the benefit of the doubt and believing in people and believing the world's a wonderful place and all these things. And then downriver, it proves to be all those things to her. And me, on the other hand, I'm like, and no one's gonna take my wallet. You know, that's all I'm thinking about, and I miss all this other stuff. And then I just over time was like, it doesn't really matter what case you can make intellectually, you can't deny what the outcome is, and it's so drastically better for her. You know, more people care about her, more people will be there for her, more people, it's just a better life.
So one thing he's calling out here, and Dr. John and Julie Gottman, the Gottman Institute, and their research on marriage, is that a key factor is that each allows the other to influence you. So that she allows the man to influence and he allows her to influence him. And often a woman is more open initially, especially to allow him to influence her. But often a man is not open to allowing influence from her. And so one thing I'm seeing here is he's not just cemented in what he believes, he's allowing himself to learn and grow wisdom throughout his life and through the relationship as well. But he's not giving up who he is. He's learning through that. So let's fast forward. Say a man and woman are in a marriage for 10 years, 20 years, and he's open to being influenced by her versus not, versus punishing any difference that she has, or him being righteous about his values and blaming her and trying to fix her, versus being open and not trying to change her. Within that clip, he said that she never tried to change him.
Yeah.
And it's also been said that he's not tried to change her. He's allowing her to influence him. What does that feel like for a woman deep into a relationship, when the difference between a man being open to influence versus, being rigid about his values?
Yeah, I've actually felt that before. We talk so much about king energy here. And I've felt really powerful king energy in gentlemen, maybe in like my grandfather's bracket, where they're definitely a king, but they haven't done any sort of work. There's nothing they've allowed the feminine to gift them. And so I have a really hard time being around that kind of king energy, because it feels like there's just a hard stop, and there's no value that my feminine can dance around or offer or have emotion around. It feels like a kind of an impotent feeling for the feminine. Whereas when there's king energy that surveys his land, is grounded on his 2 feet, feels the tree of his whole being, but also feels the breeze of the feminine, and uh like sees what is there's magic in there, sees their value in there, and kind of want to cultivate life with her. That's when the feminine gets to feel that her feminine is a valuable thing, that it's not just about I only have some sort of power by being masculine. It's like these breezy things in me, these that I offer, these like blows of life, of aliveness, matter and hold up not only me but make other people's lives better.
I can hear that. I'm sure there's men that have questions. So if you're here live and you have a question about that, punch it in the chat or raise your hand. If you're watching this video, post questions in the comments and we'd be happy to get back with you. So we'll take a look at the chat here in a moment. Let's go ahead and jump over to the People article again. It says, even though they, Bell and Shepard, make marriage look easy, the two opened up about the amount of work they put into their relationship. She claims the two disagree on almost everything. They do so in a healthy way, a communication style they developed throughout their relationship. She says therapy is not something to be embarrassed about, she told Good Housekeeping. She also revealed it helped her manage her temper and learn to solve problems with him constructively, without contempt. It's so obvious now that every 2 years you have to go back, she told Self. It's so obvious now that every 2 years you have to go back to, she's referring to therapy. I think, well, for instance, Cynthia and I go to different professionals for leadership. Either it's in depth of intimacy or into values and what we want. And so going to professionals to get different perspectives, to get different fun homework, let's say, is a fantastic thing. And that's what she's referring to here. All right, I'll show a clip from, and now if you're in this community, if you've been in this community for a while, you may have seen this clip already, but I want to make a point of what she's talking about here in this article, where she says they disagree on almost everything, but they do so in a healthy way, a communication style they developed. And it wasn't her. It wasn't her that originally brought up this healthy communication style. It was actually him. And so I'll show this clip here to make the point. Here we go.
First met, we fell madly in love, and I loved the dramatic exit. There's nothing I craved more than, like, you know, the first year you're working out your kinks. I loved it. We'd get in a fight, because we would fight a lot, and I'd like yell something, then I'd slam the bedroom door, then I'd slam the front door, then I'd get in my car, and then I'd skid out the driveway, and then I'd just go like sit around the corner in my car. And it felt so good, and I realized how incredibly toxic it was only after he pointed it out. 3 months into our relationship, he was like, yeah, you can't leave anymore during fights. I'm not gonna do that. And I was like, what? He was like, you can't do that. I'm not gonna have a relationship. He has a very high standard.
Wow,
and
that's
a
impressive.
Strong code of ethics. He's like, no, I have more respect for myself than to be in, I love you, but I'm not gonna do that my whole life. And I was like,
Was that attractive when he said that? Wow.
so then he said, but here's how evolved he is. He said, let's just help you. You're not a good fighter. And I always thought I was, because I won.
Right.
He's like, no, people can't do that. Our marriage won't survive. And everything he was saying was making so much sense. And I was like, damn, this guy.
So let's jump in there. What about him speaking for what he wants? So he knows what he wants. He has this vision of what conflict looks like. He's not shaming her for that, but the way she's putting it, he's saying in like, well, you're just not good at fighting. So let's help you get better at fighting. And so here's one step. Instead of leaving the house, I want you to not leave the house. And she goes on later to say that, okay, now you can't leave the room. And I can imagine some women saying, isn't that controlling, Cynthia? Isn't that terribly controlling? And he's not allowing her, I don't know, her freedom to leave the house if she wants. And isn't this a dangerous thing? But let's start there about his influence of her in this moment. What are you seeing there?
Well, I'm very much like his skills of containment, because he doesn't try to go right away to, no, you're going to sit right here and we're going to have a conversation. There are many steps between redirecting someone's behavior to the ultimate result. I really appreciate that Kristen was like, oh, and that was so hot. And probably 90% of the time, you're not going to experience your wife being like, oh, that's so hot that you did that.
That you set for yourself.
However, the masculine energy of painting the picture that this is for the health of the relationship, and painting the picture of this is how we have, the masculine feels respected and the feminine feels respected in relationship. That is incredible. That is the masculine wrapping its kingly wisdom around a situation and slowly saying, we need to move in this direction. And she may not like that at all, but it gives her something to push against and feel into. And she feels that this is consistent. It gives her a way to slowly start melding into that energy with you. As opposed to the one and done, everyone just throws up their hands. She doesn't respect you at all, and she's grossed out by you telling her what to do.
Yeah. So from the beginning, he knew that he wasn't sure about her. He knew that he was confident in who he was, and he knew he wasn't perfect. And she said this was the beginning of the relationship. So right from the beginning, 3 months in, he's willing to stand up for that and risk losing her.
Yeah.
And risk losing her. Let's take a look at the chat. If allowed, too much of her influence can put a man on a slippery slope to Mr. Nice Guy. Self-awareness of the sliding into Mr. Nice Guy would allow you to grab a branch on the way down to stop the slide and get a chance to look at the big picture and then decide on what influence from her works good for both of you. Yeah, that's very well said. Again, if we think as a man that she always has to be happy, that's Mr. Nice Guy. If we think that we have to be perfect and then we're going to get love for being perfect, That's Mr. Nice Guy. And why are those things not ultimately something that a woman's attracted to?
Yeah, I will just throw out there that I know your wife might act like you're supposed to be perfect, and that the whole bane of her pain and stress and overwhelm is because of your lack of perfection. But really, what happens is if the masculine's walking around with that high alert anxiety, that he has to be perfect, that there is a bit of walking on eggshells, or even he's carrying the story of that from growing up. She'll feel that from him on an energetic level, and it will feel like he is expecting her to be perfect. She will feel like his self-judgment or him trying to manipulate that in his own mind is somehow judging her or manipulating her, and it won't compute, as opposed to the masculine who stands solidly in himself, even stands solidly in knowing that sometimes he could slip a little, but he knows what branch to grab. For the feminine, again, that feels grounded in her body, that feels solid, and that feels like a really trustworthy energy because it doesn't change.
That it's okay to slip, it's okay to not be perfect, to know that that's what's going to happen and be okay with it within your own self as a man. So that's a great example of how this work starts with you. Let's take a look at the chat again. A small thing, it's easier to put down your foot and insist on your values and needs in month 3 of a relationship than you're 20, especially if you have kids. So yes, right? And if we could all go back in time, we would give this knowledge to that older self. I'm talking to myself too. And you can still do it now. Now, I would imagine, okay, there has to be, what we teach is there has to be emotional common ground. So imagine a horizontal line, and under that line has to be emotional common ground. In other words, she has to want something with you. If she doesn't want something with you, then there's no chance for her to desire behavior change, which goes above the line. Like we're seeing in these examples here. Hey, I'm not going to fight like this for the rest of our relationship. So, hey, we need to get you better at fighting. He's saying with a smile on his face. She still wants the relationship at that point. Part of this work, guys, to zoom out, part of this work is when you turn your shoulders for your own self, for your life, you have to feel good about who you are on a day-to-day basis. Not every minute, but inspired by who you are and feel good the path that you're on. What do I want? How am I going about that? And how am I going to lead myself in the world? Then when you turn toward a woman, you can't lose all of that and just try to placate her or walk in eggshells or beg but I've made all these mistakes too. That's why I'm here teaching this. And when you turn toward her, you still have to have that grounded piece of who you are. So the work begins with you. And talk with us about, so if I turn my shoulders, if I'm any man here watching this or here live, and I turn my shoulders away and I feel good about who I am, and then I bring that into the space with her, what is that like? Even if she's upset, what is that like just in and of itself, the man's energy, if he feels good about his life?
I guess I keep going back to this energy of solidness. So sure, are there women who you come back and you're feeling great about yourself and they even get triggered by that, because then there's no one to blame about them feeling unhappy about themselves. However, when you bring solid energy that's not waving inside of you, that's not judging and knocking your own self down, she has the chance to feel what you truly stand for, not the story that's gone on in the past of the relationship. Her physical chemistry gets to feel your nervous system in this state of calm. And regardless, that's going to affect her nervous system in a positive way, even if you don't see it. And is it her responsibility to respond positively to you in that place, to respond positively to your calm? Absolutely. And she may not be there yet. There's her own patterns, but at least we've got a foot for her to now stand on. At least she has a chance of pulling herself up from the sludge to actually meet you.
And it'll take time. We've seen that with hundreds of guys that we've worked with, but the foundation for this is you feeling grounded within and strength within your own self, right? Also in the chat, would he have said that and risked losing her if they'd had kids together? Not that one shouldn't, but would his bar for tolerance of her behavior have been moved based on kids in the picture? And as a general question, should one move that bar if kids are a part of it? So it's easy to say, well, no, kids shouldn't affect that. And then the reality is, well, they do. And I've lived that as well. They do. It tugs at your heart in a different way. And this is why when you turn your shoulders, when you go to your men, when you do your own self work, let me say this in a different way. I had not done the philosophical and existential work, the consciousness work, the stoic perspective that everything in my life is going to go away at some point. And so I was so enamored with the dopamine rush of the moment, of external success, of my woman being happy with me, of me being successful in life, that all of that bullshit got in the way, so to speak, of me really knowing and being grounded in who I am. So all that to say, kids should not make you more fearful otherwise. Do they when we're steeped in our egoic needs, our egoic voice? Yeah, of course they do. And that's a big piece of this work. So let's step forward. If you want to jump in live, raise your hand in Zoom and we'd be happy to call on you. So let's finish up this video from Dax Shepard and then we'll go to you, gentlemen, live with questions. So raise your hand in Zoom if you want to come in, please.
And I wanted that. And so I chose to move more in her direction, you know? She didn't ask me to. I wanted what she had and I replicated it. And conversely, I'll pat myself on the back. A lot of the things I think she could have done better, I never said. She's the first person I dated. I made a real conscious decision that I wasn't going to try to make her into the person I wanted to date, because I know what happens when I try to make them the person I want to date. I don't end up liking that person. And so I didn't do that, and lo and behold, she has come the same exact distance towards me as I've come towards her. You know, without me, she's never on your show admitting she has depression. She's never doing that. That's like something she got from me. And then that has added this level to her life that these people reach out to her and say, I've been with a guy 3 years, I haven't admitted I have depression. I'm so ashamed of that. And she's seen the results of like what her being honest and flawed and all these things, what it cultivates. And so it happened to her and it happened to me, and neither of us were saying you got to start doing it this way or you need to be this way. It's like some magic osmosis happened.
So I want to make the quick point, and then we'll go over to the gentleman who raised his hand. The point is that couples that are renewing a healthy, what we call level 3 relationship, the conscious open intimacy, the growing together, they're continuing to renew these concepts. So it's easy to talk about at the beginning of the relationship. If you know more about this couple, he's faced addiction issues along the way. They've gone back into therapy and things. There's a lot of turbulence in their relationship, but they're still continuing to work on it. And so part of this is to know, well, what is the work in the first place? That's what we teach. What are the foundational tools? What are the foundational concepts here in the first place? And how do I keep striving forward on that path? To finish up the keynote here. So I want to add to this. How did Dax Shepard attract Kristen Bell, and how do they keep their relationship strong? He owns his flaws. He doesn't put her on a pedestal. He knows what he wants. He stands up for himself. And what else would you add to this list? I want to add a rhetorical question. What else would you add to this list from what you've seen so far? So let's go to the man that raised his hand.
I just want to respond to your thing about when you have kids, you said it's not about that, you know, it makes you more fearful. And of course, you don't want to be fearful. But it's not just about fear. When you have kids, you've been together 20 years. Let me just give you an example. Suppose you meet a new woman. Turns out she's addicted to cocaine. You probably just walk away. Now you've married 20 years, you have kids together, and somehow she gets addicted to cocaine. You don't just walk away. You're willing to do, you know, you're not willing to put up with her being an addict, but you're willing to put way more work into it rather than just walking away. There is 20 years, kids, the whole thing makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. Certainly. And in this example, I'll just make a point in this example, when she argued the way that she did, he didn't just walk away. He said, okay, let's make this better. So in your example of you find out she's addicted to cocaine, what would be a step that you would want to take? What would you want to do with her at that point?
I mean, 3 months into the relationship would be very different from 20 years. Like 3 months is you get this fixed now. 20 years, you're going to be a little more tolerant.
Sure. And so how so? How would you see yourself approach with the work that you've been doing so far, with what you know about this work, with who you are as a man right now? What would you want to do with your wife if she was addicted to a substance and you've been 20 years in?
I'd have to think about this, but offhand, I would say, have the hard conversations, all that stuff. But it would be much harder to say, and if you don't, I just don't know how exactly to put this, but it would be there's just way more at stake.
Of course. So we're not refuting that at all. So
I know.
I totally give you
I'm very well.
No, that's good. I totally agree. And so let's take this a different angle. Often there's a phase of this work where and I went through this, where men get really angry and jaded and resentful. And I studied this stuff every single day. Okay. And so when you watch things and you think, yeah, it's fucking, he's tall, he's a movie star. What are we even talking about here? Okay, we're talking about the concepts. And so the concept of, you just said, you would have the hard conversation with her. There are a tremendous amount of men that are terrified of having a hard conversation, right?
So am I.
Sure. So that was an excellent point that you just made of, well, I would have the hard conversation based off of what? Off of what the positive thing you want for the relationship, your future vision together that you're wanting to grow toward, what you believe as a man. You'd have, I hope I'm leading you here now, you'd have curiosity about what the substance was for. Like, what is she? And I spoke with men all the time. Alcohol is a hard one. What are you getting through the substance that's maybe a suppressed part? So maybe she's unhappy, and so she goes to cocaine, and maybe she's never talked about her unhappiness. This happens all the time, right? She's hidden parts of herself that she hasn't brought out. And maybe she says, well, I'm afraid to do that. And that's where the work comes in. So take us from there. What other question might you have, or what other points on your mind?
I think I'm going to get away from the cocaine example because it's too stark.
Sure.
It's something subtler.
Sure.
There's a certain way she has of being that you just don't. After 3 months, you just wouldn't put up with it. Maybe the way she fights.
Yeah.
Right. Is less stark than the cocaine example. And you're like, look, or maybe she sulks. Let's say, you have a fight and she sulks for 3 days. You might, after 3 months, it's easy to say, look, you got to fix this or it's over. I won't put up with that.
Yeah.
After 20 years, she sulks for a couple of days. It's just,
play with me here. If 20 years in, and I agree, and I've been in that spot 12 years, not 20, but a long time. So let's play with that spot. Let's say she sulks, stonewalls.
These are hypotheticals, by the way. I'm not describing.
Sure. Let's say that she sulks and stonewalls. Okay. Now you're not going to say, get over this or I'm done, because it's not 3 months in, to your point, it's 20 years. But what would you say? You would say, hey, I believe, and this is another prompt from another teaching that we've done, right? So you start with, I see you're upset about something. I'm going to oversimplify this for the sake of time. I see you're upset about something. I saw you go into your room and not talk with me for 3 days. Okay. I believe, fill in the blank. I believe that we should come to one another, even if it's a hard conversation, and say the hard things. And then the third piece is, I want, fill in the blank, because I want us to trust one another. I want us to have a safe place here. I want us to express, even if it's a hard conversation. So with skills, my point is, you recognize this isn't okay. The stonewalling is not okay. And then you bring in skills, and the skill of, I notice, I believe, I want. And she may say, go fuck yourself and walk away. Okay. And then we deal with it from there. That's another bridge to cross. But one mistake that we often make, and I've been there, is we think 5 steps ahead. We try to play chess, but instead we have to play checkers. We have to take things one step at a time, one bridge at a time, and we deal with it one step at a time. And if she says, fuck you, and walks off, then we go back to your therapist, your coach, your group, your guys, your male friends, your journal, your prayer, your self-introspection of what to do then and thereafter. Absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you for coming in. What question might you have? What are you seeing from this call today? Come on in. What might you add to this list of the man that he's being? He owns his flaws. He doesn't put her on a pedestal. He knows what he wants. He stands up for himself. What would you add to this list?
Yeah, so one thing I noticed, I think was really refreshing too, is, and I think it's the level of authenticity he had in the interview, and I'm gonna add to that a bit. I feel like it's, I as a Hollywood person, some of the things that he was sharing surprised me, because a lot of times there's always this, in my experience in listening to interviews, celebrity interviews, whatever, there's always seems to be like this filter where you may catch a glimpse of bits and pieces of the true person, but there's, we have to say this, we can't say that, things, there's a level of being proper, not saying certain things that are just, faux pas. And I noticed right off the bat that did not have that. I mean, when he says, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be with her or not, it was really, for my question to answer for myself. That's not something you hear often. And I can't help but think that he carries that. He carries that with all aspects of his life. And that has to be something that's incredibly attractive. So yeah, I think, authenticity would be one to add to that list for me.
Good. Yeah.
Even as you were sharing that, I was very drawn to your masculine wisdom around that. And so something I do, I mean, there's a lot of unfairness in what's expected of men and what's expected of women. And one of the things I find is unfair is that women really do look to the masculine to model authenticity, to model that it's okay, that things are okay in the horizon, in the present, in the future. It calms their own kind of evolutionary fear. And in the modern world, maybe you're not so much sharing with your woman, don't worry, that horrible neighboring tribe, they've gone in the other direction. But you're sharing with her your own nervous system of, I'm okay with the inside of me, and I am unabashedly in my own authenticity and my own grounding. And that's so attractive to her because it gives her permission and her feminine, and it allows her to feel again that there's nothing that's being hidden, that you're solid. And that just pulls at her heart, that pulls at her belly in this very warm, solid energy.
Yeah. Thank you. Great stuff. I appreciate it. It's good to see every single man here. This call again, we'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll see you on the forum. Reach out to us. Check out our stuff. See you guys next time. Thanks, Cynthia. Bye, guys.